Well, hello everybody, it's Claire Obermarck here in another story for our series, Mountains, Rocks and Stones. I'm just sitting here waiting for the storm to come over, and hopefully we're going to get a good deal of rain, which is really needed at the moment. When the clouds come low over a few days, it really builds up, and a storm just lightens the air and everybody feels better for it. So hopefully, we've had plenty of lightning earlier, so I'm hoping that it starts back up again. And in the meantime, I thought I'd sit here and keep an eye on the sky and record a story here for you. This week's story is from Norway. It's a Norwegian fairy tale or folk tale, and it's about a farmer and his wife. And they had 3 children, 3 boys. And the 2 oldest boys were pretty outgoing, pretty confident, and could be boisterous at times. And the youngest boy was very different. He was very quiet, and he would just spend most of his time sitting by the fire, staring into the yellow flames and raking over the ash. And because of this, they named him Aslad. Well, the farmer had a meadow up near a mountain, and every year at midsummer they would go up to the meadow and they would harvest, because the long, lush grass would be ready, and they would chop it down, dry it out, and that would sustain them and the animals through the winter. And it got to midsummer, so we sent the 2 boys up to the meadow. But when they got there, they got into the barn and started to get the things out, because they would usually stay overnight. And all of a sudden, the air changed and the sky changed, and there was a great ruckus and a great noise, and it was deafening, the noise and the rumble coming through the air. And then the ground started shaking as well. And then they started to hear a chewing sound and a snorting and a sniffing sound. So they just ran. They were so scared they just ran home, and they would not go back. Well, their father said, well, when I was your age, I would go up every midsummer to that meadow. I wasn't scared of anything. So he went up and had a look himself, and sure enough, the meadow was down to the quick. Everything had been eaten. There was no harvest that year, and they had a very difficult winter. So the following year came, and the father asked the 2 oldest boys if they would go up and prepare the meadow, and they refused. And they said, we're just not going back there. Well, Aslad will have to go, said the farmer. No way, said the boys, he's useless. He'll be halfway home before he's even there. Ugh, he's an idiot. He won't be able to do anything. Well, you're not going to go, said the dad, so he needs to go. So Aslad went up to the meadow. He went into the barn and he got his kit out, got his sleep things ready. And he was just getting settled down when he heard this loud noise that he'd never heard before. It just filled up his ears. His ears were ringing. The skies changed, the entire atmosphere changed, and there was a huge noise, and then there was a shaking of the ground, and Aslad just went over to the barn window and he looked out, and then the noise changed into a sniffing and a snorting and a chewing type of noise. And he looked out of the window, and there he saw a horse, an absolutely beautiful horse, ordained with copper. It had a copper saddle and a copper bridle, and not only that, hanging off the saddle was a pristine copper suit of armour. Well, Aslad knew that there was some kind of magic at play here, and he knew that in his pocket he had his fire steel, and he knew that iron and metal would protect him from any magic, and he'd be safe. So he took that out of his pocket, and he went down into the meadow, and he gently approached the beautiful horse, and he ran the fire steel over the horse's mane, and the horse bowed its head, and gently Aslad led the horse away, because he knew of a secret meadow further up the hill towards the mountain. Nobody else knew about that apart from Aslad, and he knew that the grass was sweet and lush there. So he gently took the horse into the other meadow, and the horse was happily munching on the fresh, lush green grass in no time, and he left him there, went back to the barn, slept over, and then sorted out his dad's meadow the next day. Went back home. Fine, absolutely no problem. Now the next year, the dad again asked the two older brothers, and they again refused. But they didn't believe Ashlad had done anything. They accused him of getting somebody in to help him. But Ashlad didn't say anything to this, he just stayed quiet, and as they talked he would just stare into the yellow flames. So when his father asked him to go back a second time, he said yes, and again he went up to the meadow and he got settled into the barn, and the grass on the meadow was looking glorious. It was gently swaying in the warm breeze. It was pristine, perfect to be harvested. And again Ashlad got himself settled down for the night, got his sleeping kit out, and just as he was snuggling down, lo and behold, a big noise came through the air, filling the clouds and the sky. A big ruckus, just this huge sound that seemed to fill up the whole valley, and then the ground itself started shaking. And once again Ashlad went towards the window, and as he did so, the sounds changed, and he heard a snuffling and a panting and a chewing kind of noise. And what did he see from the window? But another horse, a little bit bigger this time. It was absolutely beautiful, and this horse was ordained with silver. So it had a silver saddle, silver bridle, and not only that, hanging from its silver saddle was a pristine silver suit of armour. Well, again Ashlad took out his fire steel and he walked gently up towards the horse, passed it over his mane. The horse bowed its head, and Ashlad led it gently up to the secret meadow, where it stood quite happily with the copper horse. And Ashlad went back, and the meadow was harvested, and his father was happy. It had seen him through the winter once again. Again his brothers accused him of taking on help or getting somebody else to do all the work, and Ashlad didn't bite. He just sat and stared into the fire and raked over the ash. Well, the third year came, and his father asked him again to go up to the meadow, and again his two older brothers refused. So up went Ashlad, and lo and behold, into the barn, just settling down, and then different noises filling the air, and a great rumble. And this time the rumble was so loud that the entire barn started shaking, and Ashlad thought, the barn's going to fall down any minute. All the dust was knocking down from the ceiling. Well, he made his way over to the window and he looked out, and the sounds changed, and all of a sudden the air was full of sniffing and snorting and a grunting sound and a chewing sound. And Ashlad looked out the window, and there he saw the most magnificent horse he'd ever seen, surely from another realm completely. A beautiful, huge horse, and this one was adorned with gold. So it had a golden saddle, a golden bridle, and hanging from its saddle was a suit of armour made of pure gold. And Ashlad did exactly the same thing. He approached the horse gently, ran his fire steel over the mane, and then he led the horse up to the secret meadow. And once again, they harvested the meadow, and they had a good winter from doing that. Well, that was all well and good, and Ashlad's father was really pleased. And the kingdom where they lived was really big, and it was ruled over by a king and a queen, and they had a daughter. They had one child, a princess, and she was coming of age, and they were eager for the princess. Oh, sorry, that was a bit noisy. They were eager for the princess to marry somebody that was going to contribute and add to their kingdom, and somebody who was worthy of marrying her at the same time. So they needed to be really careful of who she married for the kingdom's sake. But also her father wanted somebody who in his eyes was brave enough and warranted to take the hand of his only child, his daughter. So he decided to place her by the wings of a bird up on the top of a glass mountain. And he said that any suitor or knight or nobleman could attempt to reach her on top of the glass mountain, and when they did so, they were to take a golden apple, and she had 3 golden apples that were on her knee, and only the suitor who got all 3 of these apples would be worthy of marrying his girl. Well, word sent out throughout the kingdom and beyond, and soon knights and noblemen and suitors came from all and far around, and they took the horses and they tried to gallop up the glass mountain, but to no avail. It was as glass itself, and it shone like a mirror, and the horses' hooves could not grip on, and each horse only got a few feet and started sliding back down. And soon enough all the horses were exhausted, and this went on all day. And Aislad's older brothers had been first there to watch and see what was going to happen. But nobody reached the top of the glass mountain, and they were all just about to leave it for that day when out of nowhere came a stranger on a horse ordained in beautiful copper, the saddle and bridle, and the stranger was dressed in a suit of armour made of copper too. And he came through the crowd, and he took the horse at a running gallop, and he sped a third of the way up the mountain, and then he stopped, and then he lifted his helmet, and he met eyes with the princess. And the man on the horse had such kind and cheerful eyes that the princess thought, what a beautiful, beautiful person. And she took one of the golden apples and she threw it down. Well, he caught the golden apple, but instead of carrying on the rest of the way up the glass mountain, he turned and the horse glided back down and away through the crowd, and away he went. Nobody knew who he was or his name or where he was from. And that night, that was all Aislad's brothers could speak of. But Aisladh said nothing and stared into the yellow flames of the fire. The next day, the tournament started again. The knights and the noblemen and the suitors once more tried to get their horses and get them up the side of the glass mountain, to no avail. And at the end of the day, a stranger came through the crowd on a horse in silver, and a hush fell over the crowd. And the stranger took a running gallop on the horse up 2/3 of the way up the mountain, and he lifted his helmet and the 2 locked eyes, and once again the princess threw a golden apple to him, which he caught, and instead of continuing up to the top, he turned and glided back down the glass mountain, through the crowd and away. And again, nobody knew who this second man was. Nobody knew his name or from where he came. And that night, that's all Aislad's brothers could speak of, and Aisladh stared quietly into the yellow flames of the fire. Well, on the 3rd day, once again, all the suitors and the noblemen came together, and the knights of the realm, and they all tried to get those horses up the glass mountain, the princess sitting on the top, and she was fairly ready to go home by this point. I mean, she'd been up there for nearly 3 days now. And again, the same thing. No horse could get more than a few feet up the mountain, until by the end of the day, a stranger came through on the most magnificent, the most beautiful horse anyone had ever seen. And a great hush fell over the crowd, and people whispered to each other, "It's him, it's him, he has come again." Well, this time the horse was covered with gold, and the rider had a gold saddle and a gold bridle, and then his entire suit of armour was made of pure gold too, and it shone against the sunlight. Well, he took the horse and he ran up to the side of the mountain, got into a gallop, and then went the full height of the mountain, right up to the summit of the mountain. And there on the top sat the princess, and the rider took back his helmet, and the princess clapped, and he swept the golden apple from her knee and didn't stop to say a bye or leave. He just carried on galloping over the other side of the mountain, back down and away. Well, nobody knew who he was. The princess was brought back down to the palace, and the king sent word out that every male in the kingdom had to be brought to him. He was determined to find out who this was, or who all 3 men were. Well, everybody had to attend. Aislad's father and 2 brothers attended, and they were pretty much the last ones into the castle. And when they had spoken to the king, he said, "And are you sure? Are there just you two and your father as males in your household?" "Well," said the brothers, "there's Ashlad, but he doesn't really count as a fella. I mean, all he does is stare in the fire. He's good for nothing, really. He's lazy. He's a strange creature. Is our Ashlad." "Is he a male?" asked the king. "Ah, yes, sire, he's a male," they answered. "Bring him," said the king. And Ashlad was sent for. And when he came into the great hall of the castle, he wore a long, heavy cloak, and his cloak was covered in bits of mud and dirt and ash from the fire. And he walked towards the king and the queen, and the king asked him questions, and Ashlad answered politely. And then he undid his cloak, and it dropped to the floor, to reveal him stood in the most magnificent suit of armour made from pure gold, and he held up to the king the 3 golden apples. Well, the princess squealed with delight because she was hoping it was him after all, and she ran over to him, and the two embraced because they really were meant to be together. And the king could not argue with the fact that this young lad was the best and the most appropriate for his daughter. And they were married, and when the king and queen passed away, Ashlad and the princess ruled over the entire kingdom, including his brothers, who never again accused him of being lazy or useless. And wherever they had that wedding, I reckon they're still celebrating now, far, far away. Well, I hope you enjoyed that folk tale of Ashlad from Norway, and I've noticed a few streaks of lightning, but we have got away with not having any rain, which is good. So I will say good night, and I will retreat back inside. And if you hear any thunder or lightning tonight, please check from your window and check that there isn't a magnificent horse waiting outside to be taken to his own special meadow. Bye-bye.